Elara was just 10 years old, a little girl with bright eyes and a heart full of love for her parents. No matter how hard life was, she never complained. She understood that money was tight, that sometimes dinner was just a piece of bread, and that her parents often whispered about things she didn't understand. But she believed they loved her. She believed they would always be there. That morning, when her parents told her they were taking her to the mall, her heart filled with excitement. It wasn't often that they did something fun together. She held her mother's hand tightly, skipping as they walked through the busy mall entrance. The bright lights, the smell of popcorn from the food court, the sound of laughter. It all made her feel warm inside. She thought, maybe today would be special, but something felt off. Her mother wasn't smiling as much, and her father seemed lost in thought. They weren't looking at the toy stores like they usually did. Instead, they walked quickly, holding her hand a little too tightly. Then, near a small bench, her mother knelt beside her. "Elara, sweetheart, wait right here," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We just need to grab something real quick." Her father nodded, forcing a small smile. "We'll be right back, okay? Stay here and don't talk to strangers." Elara nodded, trusting them completely. "Okay, I'll wait." She watched them walk away, blending into the crowd. At first, she didn't think much of it. She swung her legs, humming a little tune, watching people pass by. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20. The excitement in her chest started to fade. She looked around, expecting to see their familiar faces, but they weren't there. Maybe they got lost in the crowd. Maybe they were still shopping. She stayed put, just like they told her. But as more time passed, her hands grew cold and her stomach felt funny. The mall got busier, then quieter. People walked past her, some glancing, some not noticing her at all. An hour passed, then another. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she told herself not to cry. They were coming back. They had to. Parents don't just leave their kids. But as the sky outside darkened and stores started closing, reality began to settle in. Her parents weren't coming back. She stood up, her legs shaking, looking in every direction. Maybe they were waiting for her somewhere else. Maybe she had misunderstood. She wandered through the mall, peeking into stores, calling out softly, "Mom? Dad?" But no one answered. Panic gripped her tiny chest. She rushed to the food court, to the toy section, to every place she thought they might be. But they weren't there. The mall's bright lights now felt harsh, the emptying hallways too big, too cold. A lump formed in her throat as she hugged herself. She didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. But deep down, something inside her whispered a terrible truth. She had been left behind, and for the first time in her life, she had never felt so alone. Elara's hands trembled as she pulled out the small phone her parents had given her months ago. She dialed home, pressing the cold device against her ear, hoping, praying, that her mother would answer. The phone rang once, twice, 5 times, no answer. She swallowed hard, her fingers pressing redial. Again and again, still nothing. Her throat tightened as panic crawled up her spine. Maybe they had lost their phone. Maybe they were on their way back. Maybe this was just a mistake. Tears blurred her vision as she looked around. The mall was nearly empty now, the bright neon signs flickering as stores shut their doors one by one. People passed by, their footsteps echoing in the quiet space. She tried to catch someone's attention. "Excuse me, I can't find my parents," she whispered to an older woman walking past. The woman gave her a quick glance, then smiled awkwardly. "Oh dear, I'm sure they're around. Just stay put," she said, before hurrying away. Elara bit her lip, her chest aching. She tried again, stopping a man with a shopping bag. "Sir, I think I've been left here." The man frowned, checking his watch. "Your parents will come back. Don't worry." And then he was gone too. She wasn't sure how long she sat there, watching people pass, waiting for someone to truly see her, but no one did. Her stomach ached from hunger, her small hands rubbing against her cold arms. The once exciting mall now felt too big, too empty, too terrifying. Then a deep voice broke through her thoughts. "Hey there, kiddo." Elara turned, blinking up at a tall man in a security uniform. He had kind eyes, the sort that made her want to trust him. A name tag on his chest read, "Mr. Raymond. You okay? It's getting late." Ilara opened her mouth, but her voice cracked. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. My parents, they told me to wait here, but they never came back. Mr. Raymond knelt beside her, his brows furrowed. How long have you been waiting? She sniffled. A long time. I called them, but they won't answer. He sighed, glancing around. Let's check the security cameras, okay? Maybe we can find out where they went. Ilara followed him, her heart pounding with hope. Maybe they had just gotten lost. Maybe something had happened, and they needed help. Inside the security office, Mr. Raymond typed on a computer, scrolling through footage. Ilara leaned forward, searching the screen desperately. And then she saw it, her parents, walking away, leaving the mall. Without her, her mother never looked back. Her father didn't hesitate. They just left. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. Her tiny fingers gripped the edge of the desk as a sharp pain stabbed through her chest. No, they wouldn't. Her voice was barely a whisper. Mr. Raymond stayed silent, his jaw tightening. He reached for his radio. I need to call the police, kiddo. Ilara shook her head, her whole body trembling. No, they'll come back. They have to come back. But even as she said it, she knew the truth. They weren't coming back. Ilara sat in the back of the police car, her small hands gripping the seatbelt tightly. The flashing red and blue lights reflected in the window, making her pale face look even smaller. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stared outside, her heart pounding with fear. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe when they got home, her parents would be there, waiting for her with open arms. At the police station, an officer knelt beside her, speaking in a gentle voice. Can you tell us your name, sweetheart? Ilara, she whispered. And your parents' names? She gave them the names, their address, every detail she could remember. The officers nodded, promising to take her home. Relief washed over her. Everything would be okay now. But when they pulled up to her house, something was wrong. The windows were dark. No lights. No movement. One of the officers knocked on the door. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Ilara stepped out of the car, her legs shaky. Maybe they're asleep, she said quickly. Maybe they just didn't hear. The officers exchanged a look before trying the doorknob. It turned easily. The door swung open. The house was empty. Ilara's backpack was gone. Her parents' clothes were gone. The furniture was missing. The house was nothing but walls and silence. Her heart dropped to her stomach. She ran inside, searching every corner. Mom? Dad? Her voice echoed off the bare walls. She checked the kitchen, the bedrooms, even the tiny closet she used to hide in during storms. Nothing. Tears filled her eyes as she stumbled back into the living room. No, this isn't real. They wouldn't leave me, but they had. The officers stood quietly, giving her a moment, but she could feel the truth sinking in like a heavy stone in her chest. They didn't lose her. They didn't forget. They left her, on purpose. She sank to the floor, sobs shaking her tiny body. Why? She whispered. Why would they do this to me? One of the officers knelt beside her. I'm so sorry, kiddo. His voice was full of sadness, but it didn't make the pain any less. They made calls. They tried to find family, someone who could take her in. But no one wanted her. An aunt in another city refused. A distant cousin said they didn't have space. Every call ended the same way. Number Ilara wiped her face, her whole body numb. She had no one, no home, no family, just an empty house and a heart that ached so badly she could barely breathe. A kind woman from social services arrived, kneeling in front of her. We're going to find you a safe place to stay, Ilara. I promise. Ilara nodded, but her soul felt hollow. She wasn't going home. She didn't have a home anymore. Ilara sat quietly in the back seat of the car, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. The woman driving, Ms. Hannah, had a warm smile, but Ilara didn't smile back. She couldn't. Her heart felt too heavy, too broken. We're almost home, Ms. Hannah said gently. I know this is scary, but you'll be safe here. Ilara didn't respond. She wasn't sure what home even meant anymore. When they arrived, Ms. Hannah led her inside a cozy house. It smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry. The walls were filled with pictures, kids laughing, playing, hugging. You'll have your own room, Ms. Hannah said, opening a door to a small but comfortable space. If you need anything, just ask. Ilara nodded, but said nothing. She sat on the bed, hugging her knees to her chest. The bed was soft, the blankets warm, but it wasn't home. Nothing felt like home anymore. Days passed. Miss Hannah was kind, but she had rules, chores, homework, dinner at the table. Structure helps, she would say, but Alara felt lost. She ate in silence, went to bed early, and avoided everyone. She started school again, but it was even worse. Kids whispered behind her back. She's the girl whose parents left her. No wonder, maybe she was a bad kid. Bet she cries every night. Alara heard it all. She never responded, she just kept her head down, pretending not to care. But inside, every word felt like a knife. She wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong. But what if they weren't? What if her parents left because she wasn't good enough? Miss Hannah noticed. One evening, she sat beside Alara on the couch. I know what you're feeling, she said softly. I've taken care of many kids like you, and I know the pain doesn't go away overnight. Alara swallowed hard. I don't want to talk about it. Miss Hannah nodded. Then don't. But maybe you can show me. Alara frowned. Show you? Miss Hannah handed her a sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. Sometimes when words are too hard, art can help. Alara hesitated, but that night, she picked up a pencil and started drawing. She drew a little girl sitting on a bench waiting. Then she drew the empty house, the shadows, the loneliness. For the first time in weeks, she let the pain spill out, not through words, but through colors and lines. And slowly, just slowly, something inside her began to heal. 6 years had passed. Alara was no longer the scared little girl who sat alone on a mall bench, waiting for parents who would never return. She had grown. She had healed. At least, that's what she told herself. At 16, she was thriving in school, her artwork winning competitions, her future looking brighter than ever. Ms. Hannah had become more than just a foster parent. She was family, and for the first time in her life, Alara felt safe. She still carried the scars of her past, but she had learned to live with them. One afternoon, she volunteered at a local shelter, helping serve meals to the homeless. It was something she did often, wanting to give back, to help those who felt lost like she once had. But today felt different. As she carried a tray of food to the serving line, her eyes landed on a figure sitting alone in the corner. A man, hunched over, his clothes ragged, his hair messy. Something about him made her stop. Her heart pounded. It couldn't be. But then he lifted his head. And time froze. Her father. Alara's hands tightened around the tray. The world around her blurred. His face was thinner, his beard unkempt, his eyes tired and empty. But it was him. The man who once called her his little girl. The man who had walked away without looking back. Her breath hitched. A storm of emotions swirled inside her. Anger, pain, confusion. Why is he here? Does he even remember me? She could have turned away, pretended she didn't see him. Maybe that would have been easier. But instead, she took a step forward, then another. When she reached his table, her voice came out barely above a whisper. Dad? The man flinched, looking up at her with wide, hollow eyes. For a moment, he just stared, as if his mind couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then his face crumbled. Alara! His voice broke. She swallowed the lump in her throat. It's me. Tears filled his eyes. His hands shook as he reached for her but stopped midway, as if afraid she would disappear. I thought I'd never see you again. Alara's throat tightened. You left me. He shut his eyes, a sob escaping his lips. I know. His voice was filled with regret, with something that almost sounded like shame. We had nothing. No money, no home. Your mother and I, we thought you'd be better off without us. Alara clenched her fists. You didn't even say goodbye. I was a coward, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. I thought it was the only way. But I was wrong. I've lived with that regret every single day. Alara stared at him, her chest heavy. She had dreamed of this moment so many times, imagining what she would say, how she would scream at him, tell him how much he had hurt her. But now that he was in front of her, broken and lost, all she felt was sadness. She didn't know if she could forgive him. Maybe she never would, but she couldn't walk away either. Without a word, she placed the tray of food in front of him and sat down. Her father looked at her, his eyes filled with both hope and pain. And for the first time in years, they sat together, two lost souls trying to find their way back. Alara sat across from her father, watching him as he picked up the spoon with trembling hands. He ate slowly, almost as if he didn't believe the food was real. Every bite seemed to carry the weight of his regret. She had so many things she wanted to say, so many questions, so much pain buried deep inside her. But in that moment, she chose silence. Not because she had forgiven him, not because the past didn't matter, but because hate wouldn't change anything. When he finally looked up, his eyes were full of tears. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Ilara took a deep breath. "Maybe not," she said. "But everyone deserves a second chance." Her father let out a shaky breath, nodding as fresh tears rolled down his cheeks. She didn't know if he would change. She didn't know if he would try to fix his life, but she had given him a chance. That was enough. Ilara never went back to her parents. Her mother was gone, and her father was still lost in his own struggles. But she had found something better, a real family. Ms. Hannah became more than just a foster parent. She became a mother. The other kids in the house became her brothers and sisters. They laughed together, cried together, and supported each other in ways that blood family never had. And Ilara thrived. Her art became her escape, her passion. She poured every emotion, every scar into her paintings. People started to notice. Teachers encouraged her. A local gallery displayed her work. And then, the unthinkable happened. She won a full scholarship to one of the best art schools in the country. When she received the acceptance letter, she held it in shaking hands, tears filling her eyes. She had made it. Despite everything, Ms. Hannah hugged her tight. "I always knew you were meant for great things." For the first time in a long time, Ilara believed it too. One day, a journalist came across her story. A girl abandoned in a mall, left with nothing, who turned her pain into something beautiful. They wrote an article, then another. Soon, people all over the world were reading about her. Her story went viral. People sent messages, telling her she had inspired them, that her strength gave them hope, that her kindness had reminded them of what truly mattered. Ilara looked at all the messages, tears filling her eyes. She had spent years wondering why she wasn't enough for her parents to love. But now she realized she had always been enough. She wasn't just the girl they abandoned. She was the girl who survived.